Welcome to the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Prepcast, where we guide you through everything you need to know for your certification exam. Whether you're just starting or looking to refine your knowledge, this course will set you up for success. Brought to you by baremetalcyber.com. Let's get started. Savings plans represent AWS's effort to simplify and broaden the commitment model for compute resources. Unlike reserved instances, which lock you into specific instance types or configurations, savings plans allow you to commit to a dollar per hour amount that can cover usage across multiple compute services. With a compute savings plan, this includes EC2, Fargate, and even Lambda, making it the most flexible choice. The benefit is that you still receive significant discounts compared to on-demand pricing, but without being tied to one narrow family or service. This flexibility makes savings plans especially appealing for organizations running mixed workloads or evolving architectures, where usage may shift from virtual machines to containers or serverless functions over time. Within savings plans, there are two main flavors: compute savings plans and EC2 instance savings plans. Compute savings plans offer the widest coverage, applying to any compute service, but deliver slightly lower discounts. EC2 instance savings plans are narrower in scope, limited to specific instance families in a chosen region, but offer larger discounts in return. The exam often tests this distinction by describing scenarios where workloads shift across services favoring compute SPs, or where a team consistently uses a specific EC2 family favoring EC2 instance SPs. The trade-off is always flexibility versus savings, and AWS provides both options to let organizations optimize according to their stability and predictability. Commitments under savings plans are defined by dollar-per-hour units. Rather than committing to a particular number of instances, you agree to a certain amount of spend per hour for the duration of the plan, typically 1 or 3 years. Payment options include all upfront, partial upfront, or no upfront, with higher upfront commitments usually yielding better effective discounts. This structure makes it easier to align with financial planning. The key to exam questions is remembering that savings plans are dollar-based, not instance-based. This concept separates them from RIs and reflects the broader cloud principle of aligning spend to actual usage rather than rigid configurations. Tracking utilization is essential to getting the most out of savings plans. AWS provides dashboards and reports that show how much of your commitment is being used and what your effective hourly rate is compared to on-demand. Underutilization means you are leaving money on the table by committing more than you are consuming. For exam purposes, the phrase "monitor commitment utilization" points to these reports. In real-world terms, effective cost management requires continuous observation, ensuring that your commitments are properly matched to usage patterns as they evolve. Coverage strategy is another important consideration. Best practice is to commit only to your steady baseline of compute usage, the portion of your workloads that you know will always be running. Growth and spiky demand can remain on-demand or leverage spot instances. This prevents overcommitting and ensures that your savings plans yield maximum benefit. On the exam, when a scenario describes predictable baseline with variable peaks, the answer is to cover the baseline with commitments and leave the peaks flexible. This strategy reflects AWS's larger philosophy of elasticity. Commit what is steady, flex where needed. Savings plans are not static. Organizations often need to modify their posture as usage shifts, whether by adjusting commitments during renewal or layering new savings plans on top of existing ones. For example, if a team starts migrating workloads from EC2 to Fargate, a compute savings plan may suddenly make more sense than an EC2 instance SP. The exam may signal this with language like "adjust commitments as patterns evolve." The right response is to recognize that savings plans, unlike RIs, are designed to evolve with usage, not to remain rigid. This is why they are increasingly preferred in dynamic environments. Combining savings plans with other purchasing models rounds out the cost strategy. Baselines are covered with savings plans, while unpredictable growth runs on demand, and opportunistic, fault-tolerant workloads can you spot? This portfolio approach maximizes savings without sacrificing flexibility or resilience. The exam may phrase this as, use a combination of models to balance savings and flexibility. The correct answer is not to rely on one model alone, but to layer them intelligently. In practice, this mirrors financial portfolio theory. Balance risk and reward across multiple instruments to achieve stability and efficiency. Dedicated hosts represent a different dimension altogether. Instead of focusing on cost savings, they are about physical server isolation. A dedicated host gives you access to an entire physical machine within AWS's data center. This matters for compliance, audit, or licensing reasons, particularly when using Bring Your Own License (BYOL) software that requires visibility into the underlying hardware. The exam cues are compliance requirement or licensing tied to physical cores or sockets. Unlike savings plans, dedicated hosts are not about efficiency. They are about satisfying external constraints that on-demand or shared tenancy cannot meet. It is important to distinguish dedicated hosts from dedicated instances. Dedicated instances run on hardware not shared with other customers, but you don't control the specific host. Dedicated hosts, by contrast, give you visibility and affinity to a particular machine, allowing you to meet licensing requirements that demand it. Exam phrasing like affinity to physical sockets or pin workloads to hardware points specifically to dedicated hosts. The distinction is subtle but critical. Dedicated instances isolate, dedicated hosts expose. Understanding this nuance ensures you choose the right option under compliance-heavy scenarios. BYOL licensing is one of the most common drivers for dedicated hosts. Some vendors, particularly in enterprise software, tie licenses to physical cores or require that workloads be pinned to specific hardware. Without a dedicated host, you cannot satisfy these requirements. This is less about AWS preference and more about accommodating external rules. The exam may describe this as, quote, use licenses bound to sockets. The correct choice is always dedicated hosts, since they provide the level of visibility and control necessary to align with BYOL conditions. Capacity and placement also come into play with dedicated hosts. Because you are reserving entire physical servers, placement matters. Organizations often must design guardrails for host usage to prevent wasted capacity. For example, if only a fraction of the host is used, the rest of the machine is stranded capacity. This makes dedicated hosts less about flexibility and more about deliberate planning. The exam may highlight capacity reservation with dedicated hardware, which is a direct reference to dedicated hosts. It is not about efficiency, but about isolation and compliance. Governance is critical when using both savings plans and dedicated hosts. Tagging commitments and physical resources allows costs and savings to be allocated to specific owners. Reporting tools ensure utilization is monitored and accountability is enforced across teams. The exam may frame this as, ensure visibility and ownership for commitments. The correct approach is consistent tagging, reporting, and governance structures. Without them, cost-saving mechanisms or compliance mechanisms can easily become expensive liabilities. Ultimately, the exam cues for this topic boil down to recognizing when to use each tool. Savings plans are chosen for broad, flexible compute savings across EC2, Fargate, and Lambda. Reserved instances are still viable for specific cases but are narrower. Dedicated hosts are the answer when compliance or licensing constraints demand physical server allocation. By matching the queues, steady-state workload, mixed compute services, socket-bound licenses, to the right model, you can quickly select the correct service in scenario questions. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. When choosing between compute savings plans and EC2 instance savings plans, the deciding factor is flexibility versus discount. Compute savings plans cover all compute services EC2, Fargate, and Lambda, so they are the safest choice if your workloads might shift across these platforms. EC2 Instance Savings Plans, in contrast, focus only on specific instance families in a region, rewarding you with a deeper discount if your usage is stable. The exam often makes this choice clear by describing either mixed compute services, Compute SP, or steady EC2 family usage, EC2 Instance SP. In practice, organizations often use both, covering broad workloads with Compute SPs and locking in extra savings for their most stable EC2 usage with Instance SPs. Right-sizing your commitment is essential to making savings plans effective. The best approach is to measure baseline usage, your always-on resources, and commit to that, leaving growth and spikes flexible. This ensures that your commitments are fully used while avoiding the trap of overcommitting. Payment styles add another layer. All upfront yields the largest savings, partial upfront balances, cash flow with discounts, and no upfront maximizes flexibility at the cost of slightly smaller savings. The exam may frame this as choose payment style to align with budget. The key point is that AWS provides options so you can balance financial planning with technical requirements. Avoiding underutilization is the discipline that follows. Even if you commit correctly at first, workloads change. Monitoring dashboards in AWS show utilization levels, allowing you to adjust over time. If you underuse a commitment, your effective rate rises, eroding savings. Pairing savings plans with autoscaling ensures that your baseline is consistently covered, while bursts flow into on-demand or spot. The exam cues here are: avoid wasted commitments or align commitments with scaling. The best practice is to monitor, adjust, and pair commitments with elasticity tools. Savings plans should empower efficiency, not lock you into unused capacity. Dedicated hosts, on the other hand, serve very different use cases. They are chosen when compliance or licensing rules demand control of the physical machine. This includes scenarios where software licenses are tied to physical sockets or where regulators require workload isolation at the hardware level. The cost model is different as well. You pay for the host by the hour, and your efficiency depends on how many instances you can run on that host. The exam cues are compliance, BYOL, or physical host affinity. Spotting these phrases directs you toward dedicated hosts rather than more general compute purchasing options. Cost signals for dedicated hosts revolve around host hourly charges and instance density. You want to place enough instances on a host to make it cost-effective, but not so many that you risk stranded capacity if workloads shrink. This makes host management an operational challenge as much as a financial one. For the exam, remember that dedicated hosts are not chosen for savings. They are chosen when compliance or licensing requires them. Any question emphasizing cost efficiency points elsewhere. Dedicated hosts solve regulatory and licensing needs first, economics second. Operational guardrails are critical when running dedicated hosts. Because you are dealing with physical servers, placement decisions matter. AWS tools help you track host usage and avoid waste, but teams must be disciplined in assigning workloads to hosts. Otherwise, underutilized hardware can become an expensive liability. The exam may phrase this as, ensure proper usage of dedicated hosts. The correct response involves governance, placement policies, and monitoring tools. This highlights a broader AWS truth. Cost optimization is not just technical, but also organizational. Multi-account strategies add another layer. With AWS organizations, savings plans and reserved instances can often be shared across accounts, ensuring that commitments benefit the entire enterprise rather than just one team. This prevents stranded savings in siloed environments. Dedicated hosts, by contrast, may need to be tied to specific accounts due to licensing or regulatory needs. Exam cues like multi-account environment signal the need to recall these sharing rules. The principle is straightforward. Use organizations to maximize commitment benefits across teams and accounts whenever possible. Pitfalls are easy to fall into without discipline. Overcommitment in savings plans leads to unused spend, while poorly managed dedicated hosts can result in stranded physical capacity. These mistakes are common exam distractors. For example, a question may describe unused RIs or SPs due to workload migration. The right answer is to monitor and adjust, not ignore. Similarly, a dedicated host left underfilled represents waste. Recognizing these pitfalls ensures that you eliminate incorrect answers and choose the one aligned with AWS best practices. Exam strategy for this topic boils down to recognizing patterns. Savings plans are about flexible savings across compute. Reserved instances are narrower and less flexible. Dedicated hosts exist for compliance and licensing. On the exam, if a scenario describes steady baseline plus need flexibility, think savings plans. If it describes physical server control or BYOL, think dedicated hosts. The distractors often tempt you with cheaper options, but the correct answer is always aligned to the stated requirement. That discipline requirement over cost alone is the heart of AWS exam design. Organizations often use a playbook approach to purchasing decisions. The cycle is assess, commit, observe, and iterate. Assess usage to establish a baseline. Commit to savings plans for steady workloads. Observe utilization with reporting tools, and iterate commitments as patterns shift. For dedicated hosts, assess compliance requirements, commit to hosts only where necessary, observe usage to avoid stranded capacity, and iterate as licensing needs change. This structured playbook ensures consistency across teams and reduces mistakes. The exam may hint at this with establish guardrails or document purchasing strategies. A culture of cost awareness completes the picture. Technical decisions about instances, hosts, and commitments are only effective if teams internalize their financial implications. Tagging, reporting, and accountability make costs visible, but awareness must be shared across engineering, finance, and leadership. On the exam, cues like team ownership of costs or allocate savings responsibility point to this cultural element. In practice, AWS cost optimization is not just about choosing the right model, but about creating an environment where everyone is invested in efficiency. From an exam perspective, the message is clear. Savings plans are the flexible, modern approach to compute savings, covering EC2, Fargate, and Lambda. EC2, instance SPs, deliver deeper discounts where workloads are stable. Dedicated hosts are reserved for cases where compliance or BYOL licensing requires physical machine visibility. Together, these options form part of AWS's financial optimization toolkit. The exam tests your ability to map stability, flexibility, and compliance requirements to the right purchasing decision. By remembering these cues, you can confidently navigate scenario-based questions and apply the same thinking in real-world cloud governance. That concludes today's episode of the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Prepcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode and visit us online at baremetalcyber.com or cyberauthor.me for more resources, including news, mailing lists, YouTube videos, podcasts, and much more.